Hello everyone, we are Group 6 and we will explain about Chapter 9 Subculture, and we consist of Vyosani, me Ganesha Rizkywanti, Melanie Fadila Kotrunada, and Laurista Rahayu Putri. Okay guys, I want to start with explain the definition of subculture. What is subculture? A subculture is a group within a wider culture that has its own distinct values, style, behaviors, and interests. This group often challenges or resists mainstream norms. For example, punks use fashion and music to express anti-establishment views. Subcultures express alternative identities through things like music, fashion, language, and shared rituals. These symbols are crucial in defining their uniqueness. And most importantly, subcultures give people a sense of belonging while allowing them to stand out from dominant expectations. So overall, subcultures are not just about rebellion, they are also about finding identity, connection, and meaning in everyday life. The next slide is about themes of subculture. These are 4 themes of subculture. First, power and resistance. Subcultures are tied to power struggles. According to the CCS in Birmingham, youth subculture oppose dominant culture but also absorb parts of it. This is called the incorporation or resistant paradigm. The second is cultural division. Subcultures show that the mainstream is not unified. They challenge over simplified ideas like British values or Islamic world. These broad labels often ignore the diversity within cultures. The third is interpretation and representation. Subcultures are interpreted differently depending on who's doing the interpreting. For example, Hapditch at 1979 analyzed punk through semiotics, but this method can overlook the meanings insiders assign. Also, the media often stereotypes groups like calling people nerd or goths. The fourth, fragmentation and digital media. Culture today is more fragmented than ever. Some scholars even argue the mainstream no longer exists. Concepts like post-subcultures, tropes, and scenes describe the current cultural mix. Social media play a big role. It helps keep these scattered groups and fan cultures alive and connected. The next slide is folk devils and moral panic. What is folk devils and moral panic? Folk devils are individuals or groups labeled as threats to societal values like the mods and rockers in the UK. And moral panic is society's exaggerated reaction to that threat, often amplified by the media. And I found the Cohen analysis. Cohen's analysis shows how the media distort the subculture, sometimes using symbols like hairstyle to mark rebellion. He identified 3 reactions to subcultures: first, orientation; 2, images; and 3, causation. The effect of the reaction is sensitization, societal control, culture, and exploitation. And the next slide is the cycle of moral panic. The cycle of moral panic began with a small deviant act occurs. Something minor catches attention. Then the media blow this up. This is called inventory. Then public and authorities overreact, also known as sensitization. This leads to stronger control, increased policing, stricter rules. Then the subculture passes back, often through more extreme behavior. Then this confirms the stereotype built by the media. Finally, panic and control increase again, and the cycle repeats. And the last for me is moral panics today, and how things have changed or not. Modern examples include in the UK, panic about single mothers, asylum seekers, and migrants, and in Asia, black metal music has been seen as anti-Islamic, especially in Malaysia. There's also ongoing panic around Islamophobia and youth rave culture. Evolving views show that subculture today might embrace moral panic. Thornton in 1994 argued that moral panic can act as free publicity, a priceless PR campaign. Negative media attention gives them more cultural capital, making them more interesting or rebellious. This becomes a marketing strategy. Being controversial can attract followers. Today, subculture are media savvy. They use moral panic to gain attention. It can call like exploitation.
Hello everyone, I'm Melanie Fadila and I'm going to explain about youth subculture. First thing first, what is youth subculture? Youth subculture is one that forms among young people. These subculture are distinguished by unique style, behavior, attitude, and interests that separate them apart from the dominant adult culture. For example, punks, goth, skater, and hip-hop culture have in common unique and distinct manner of expressing themselves using their clothes, language, attitude, and lifestyle choice. Next, we jumped to CCCS and subculture. You guys, have you ever wondered why youth subculture like mods, punk, or skinhead emerged in post-war Britain? It's in the book named Resistance Through Rituals, edited by Stuart Hall and Tony Jefferson in 1976. Based on Marxist theory, these works explore how youth use culture not just for politics but to resist dominant societal norms. There are 7 key concepts introduced by Clark and his colleagues in their essay. First is the concept of culture. According to Clark et al., culture is the way social groups give meaning to their life. It's how they respond to their material and social realities. Then we have hegemony. Hegemony is when the ruling class maintains power not just through force but by shaping consent. And then the third is the dominant culture. Is the culture of the group that holds the most power in society, usually the middle or upper class. The fourth is dominant ideology. Ideology is a system of ideas and beliefs about how the world should work. The dominant ideology supports the dominant culture's power by shaping how people think, even without them realizing it. Next is a class culture. It's about how a specific social class, like working class, middle class, or upper class, lives, thinks, and expresses itself. This includes values, behavior, language, and traditions. Next, we have subculture. Subculture is a smaller group within society that has its own unique style, values, and identity. Subculture usually form among people who feel left out or disconnected from dominant culture, especially young people. The last but not least is parent culture. It is the larger culture a subculture comes from. It is often the culture of the youth, family, or community. For example, if a group of teenagers grows up in a working class neighborhood, their subculture is shaped by that working class background, but they change it, mix it with their own experiences, and create something new. After World War II, British society experienced massive social, economic, and cultural shift. This change created a new environment for young people. Sociologists like Clark and his colleague identified 5 major factors that contribute to the emergence of youth subculture during this time. The first, there was an economic affluence. Second, the spread of mass communication. The third is the social dislocation caused by the war. Fourth is educational changes. Finally, the emergence of new styles and fashion. All these factors combine to create the perfect condition for youth subculture to grow. Next, sociologist Phil Cohen studied working class youth in East London. He saw that their communities were being broken up. People moved away, new buildings replaced old ones, and good jobs were harder to find. Young people responded by creating their own style. Groups like mods and skinhead, for example. This style helped them feel proud of who they were and where they came from. Clark et al. Expanded on earlier ideas by saying that youth subculture don't just reflect what's happening in real life, they create their own version of it. This idea comes from Althusser, who called it imaginary relationship with real life. To understand how subculture form, Clark said we need to look at the 3 key things. The first is structure, which refers to the actual living condition people face, like work, housing, and income. The second one is culture, which is how people collectively respond to this condition. And the third is biography, meaning that the personal stories and identities individuals built from these shared group experiences. Now we move into 3 studies from CCCS. The first one, we have study from Paul Willis named Learning to Labor. Willis' studies focus on a group of 12 boys at a school he calls Hammertown Boys. He identifies the various components of their culture, calling them lads. The lads are in direct opposition to the school authority and reject the conformist attitude of other boys, whom they refer to as ear-owls or lopes. For the lads, defining themselves against these boys forms a major part of their identity. The second, we have a study from Paul Willis named Profane Culture. In Profane Culture, he examined 2 youth subcultures from the late 1960s, the motorbike boys and the hippies. Willis explored how this youth group expressed their identity through style and behavior, focusing on the ways in which they resisted mainstream norms. And then the third study by Dick Heptage named Subculture, the Meaning of Style. It applies structuralist and semiotic approaches to analyzing youth subculture. In particular, he focused on how this subculture use style through fashion, music, and behavior as a form of resistance to the dominant social order. Haptic argues that the style of subculture are responses to the condition and experiences of their member. This style often encode opposition to mainstream culture.
Hello everyone, my name is Lauresta Rahayu Putri, and I'm going to explain about youth subculture and gender. It is focused on revealing female contribution in subculture. Angela McRobbie and Jenny Garber used CCCS approach by asking 4 questions, and the result is that women's role in subculture reflected their social roles in society. Other than that, McRobbie also argues that the street is a dangerous place for girls, and they were reluctant to drink because of the sexual dangers of drunkenness. Girls also tended to organize their cultural life differently than boys. It leads to the existence of teeny pop and rave culture. Next, we have teeny pop culture of romance. McRobbie studied the working class girls as they tend to spend most of their time at home, as it's considered less dangerous than nature public place such as street. These are the following features of girl subculture identified in 1970s. The first one is the centrality of home and bedroom. It is a place to get together with other girls to listen to records of their favorite groups. Then there was a romantic attachment to one star or group. They were most likely go out to the youth club, and then dance was important to the girl. Best friend was way more important and felt more than relationship with boys. The idea of romance was important because of continued existence of sexual double standard. Also, the last one, the girls stressed some dominant ideas of femininity in an exaggerated fashion, as they skipped the school's rules and mainly talk about boys, dresses, and also makeups. The next one is pop music, rave culture, and gender. Rave culture, according to Newcombe, 1991, is a part of youth subculture associated with long period of dancing by a large group of people with non-stop house music and trippy light show. And McRobbie highlighted 3 major points. The first one, by the 1990s, pop music became more central toward teenage girls' cultural lives. Girls are not only involved with pop music of teeny pop type, but also with the rave culture type of music. McRobbie also pointed out about the changing nature in girls' magazines. Magazines such as Jackie and The 17 shifted from the main focus toward music, fashion, and celebrity culture. The last one, dance became important for girls, just like McRobbie stated that it was only their entitlement means that they can express themselves freely. Next, we have youth subculture and race. Hapditch, 1979, argued that the existence of black culture and black people in Britain played a key role in shaping the style of white subculture. In the collection of articles called The Empire Strikes Back by CCCS, it examined the place of race and the political problem in the 1970s British capitalism. Next, we have the further development by Paul Gilroy in 1987. He criticized a great deal of established work and explored the relation between the race and class in contemporary Britain. He looked at the different parts of black expressive culture, focusing on black music like reggae. Next, we have Simon Jones' Black Culture, White Youth. It is a book where Jones explored how black cultural forms, especially music, have influenced many white young people in Britain. The young people growing up in this environment adopted black music like reggae, not only for entertainment, but also a form of expressing resistance, exploring subculture, and also a way to shape their identity. The next one, we have a general critic towards Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies and Youth Subculture. As for the first critic, it is by Gary Clark in 1990. There are 3 huge implications that shape his critique. The first one is the lack of consideration of subcultural flux and dynamic nature of styles. And then the separation of subculture from the rest of society, which is incorporated with dominant social relation. And the last one is the fake of style is treated as if it is an objective fact. And what inside his critique? The first one, it is about unclear writing about where subcultures fit in society and what problem they're actually trying to solve. Next, we have little explanation of where the different subcultural style actually came from. Little attention paid to variation of styles and commitment within different subculture. Not enough focus given on how people join and leave subcultures. And the last one, there is a clear split between kids in subcultures and the other regular kids. The second critic is by Stanley Cohen, 1987. He suggests that there is too much contextualization and overemphasis on historical development in Birmingham works. He also characterizes the style of Birmingham approach that leads to his critique. His critiques, the first one, it is too simple to see styles as forms of resistance. Styles can be both oppositional and conservative at the same time, with some parts pushing back and some parts supporting status quo. Next, he points out that people often think that style first develops within a group and only get commercialized later. But in reality, they are closely related from the start. And the last one, he points out that people often see subcultures as another way the English working class fights back against those in power. Cohen also examines the issue of biography that Birmingham approach only focuses too much on ordinary working class. He maintains that actually subcultures are more flexible than people think, that people can come and go or be involved in different ways.
Aspects of youth culture. So, symbolic creativity is the way we express the symbols, like everyday language, body language, new songs, new films, etc., and symbolic work provoke new products like personal identity, new trends, new styles of song, etc. This idea of expression fits the postmodern society definition, where there's more than just one way to live life, but they mix different styles and ideas. From here, a couple of writers have issued some problems. The first one being social and cultural life has split, so it's no longer possible to find the clearly isolatable forms of subculture. The second being the youth subcultures have become more generalized, and thus it's no longer possible to locate and identify clear subcultural groupings. From those aspects, Cheney suggests that the idea of subculture is redundant and more general. Therefore, varieties of symbolizations and involvements are more common in everyday life. Well, Cheney said that, and Bennett argue that subculture is deeply problematic due to rigid lines of division it imposes, which in many cases it doesn't fit into just one category. It is less organized than the idea of subculture, which suggests unity and cohesion. Moving on to some key features of recent subcultures. The study of subculture has been revitalized by the rave and dance culture. Other work on rave and dance culture has been critical on the Birmingham approach. Therefore, Thornton conducted her own analysis. Well, Thornton argues that Birmingham approach was more focused with the reading of subculture as a text rather than an experience, with an in-depth investigation of the views of the participants. Considers how cultural hierarchies work within the subcultures, meaning she considers between the authentic and the fake, the hip versus the mainstream, and the underground versus the mass media. Next, Thornton concluded the idea that the media are critical to subcultures. Even so, there are still forms of subcultures out there, though they're often mediatized. And this is Redhead's take on postmodernism and the study of youth subculture. The first one being Redhead criticizes the concept of homology by Willis. This concept of homology is that pieces of a subculture fit perfectly, forming a clear message. And next is that Redhead suggests that it is too problematic and too simple to see music as a straightforward expression of a subcultural community. Moving on to rethinking subcultures, interactions, and networks. Gary Fine and Cheryl Kleinman argue that the concept of subculture had previously been used in a confused and unclear fashion. Therefore, they identified into four problems. The first one being subcultures have been defined as subdivisions of persons. It's something that what they call subsociety. However, in contemporary society, they allow movement between different groups. They argue that the concept of subculture is often used without people having the cultural knowledge about it. And next, they argue that the study of subcultures tend to treat them as if they were homogeneous. Thus, if a number of people were in the same group, they would have the same beliefs and the same practices. Fine and Kleinman argue that subculture should be used to refer to an interacting group. Therefore, this is their four mechanism which communication can occur. The first one being individuals may be members of a number of different groups. The second, there may be other interconnections which don't involve group membership, but this is based on weak ties. It involves something like a conversation with acquaintances. And next, individuals or groups perform what Fine and Kleinman refer to as structural roles. This is by bringing together people that might not normally talk to each other and sharing cultural knowledge. And next, there may be media diffusion, as when certain films or television programs influence culture in a wider sense. Next is fans' stereotypes, Star Trek, and opposition. There has been a statistic in writings that something is wrong with being a fan. Jensen maintains that the literature on fans produced two types of pathological fans. The first one being obsessed loader. This type of fans is usually socially isolated, is under the influence of the media, and has entered an intense fancy relationship with celebrity. The second one is frenzied or historical member of the crowd. They're shouting, making a ruckus, and often misbehaving at a sports match. For example, the fans of football. The fans of Star Trek. Bacon Smith studies the types of written text that are produced by the fans. The first one being Mary Sue. This call for the introduction of a young woman character who manages to save the ship, though she died due to her efforts. The term Mary Sue is considered as a disapproval. Second being Lay Spock. This writing requires putting Spock in a heterosexual sexual relationship. Next is K, S, or slash. This writing places Kirk and Spock in a homosexual relationship. The fourth being hurt comfort. This type of writing put one of the characters in suffering and pain, and the other character is involved with caring and comforting the injured character. Fans of opera daytime shows. Harrington and Bilby explain that it is because female consumers of women text, including soaps, find it easier to relate and find pleasure in the primary narrative that they don't need to create their own version, or in this case, fan fiction, for example. Other early communication researchers seemed to think of soap shows as interesting, and some tried to figure out why people were so involved with them. Fans' involvement often take place in a supportive environment. The idea of audience involvement is multifaceted and a factor that can change people behavior. That is all from Group 6. Thank you very much for watching. See you!